Well, our reporter Nqobile Madlala has been following that story. She joins us in studio. We'll also be joined, of course, for this conversation by Toxicologist Dr. Gerhard Verdoorn. Let me begin in studio with you, Nqobile. It's been devastating hearing the accounts of how many of these people lost their lives. As a reporter who was out there today, I think just detail for us what it is that that community has said.
Well, I think everyone is devastated. This came at a time where they were not expecting, and I suppose nobody expects death, but it was very difficult for a lot of people. I think one of the people that were very hard to watch was a lady that was just crying nonstop, and she said she had lost a 19-year-old, a 20-year-old, and her granddaughter. And this, of course, was very difficult for her because this was umakoti wake, which was also the son as well that had passed away. And this was very difficult for her, and she said she just needed to take them and take them home, but she doesn't know what to do. Now, where the incident took place is literally couple of meters away from her home, but you'll know that these are informal settlements, so there's not enough road to separate the spaces. So she says she was at her home and she had left the couple down where, which is opposite where the incident took place, and she says she was called and everybody said to her, everyone just keeps going out and falling, but they don't know what's going on. There's a guy that was inside the same compound, the same area, and he says his son walked out and all of a sudden they saw him just falling and then there was blood coming out of his nose. So it's very difficult. I saw that man break apart and he just started crying. There was another man that was very angry because his uncle as well had passed away, and he felt that this could have been stopped. But this was an incident that continues in the area because everybody can do anyhow because they live in an informal settlement and they feel like they're not protected. Mm-hmm. Now, if you look at all these people, they already don't have enough. And now they have to pay for funerals. They have to pay for all of this. So financially it's becoming a problem. But also to be there, Kathy, it just doesn't feel right. Mm. You could smell the gas. I mean, after 10 minutes of just standing there, you could feel your nose, this part here, dries up. You could feel the back of your throat dries up.
So it's got a very strong smell then?
Very strong.
And I would imagine that some of the people may have come out of their shacks to try and also escape the stench that's sort of quickly moving through the community.
And yes, so you find that a lot of people were telling us that people were running away from the shacks. Yeah. And so as a result, they found most of them in some of these pathways. So someone would run and fall, and then they'd find them there. Someone would run and fall somewhere along that line. But the stench very strong. There's a woman who said she lives about 200 meters away from where it happened, and she says she was coughing the entire time. We spoke to a lady who had a baby that was probably about 4 months or so, and she said she just feared for her child, and so she took her child and she ran out. Yeah. So very strong smell, very difficult to escape, and some obviously didn't get a chance to.
It's one of the most horrific ways for people to die. Dr. Verdoorn, I want to bring you into this conversation. It's unimaginable that people could be sitting down, going about their daily business, and just walking on a pathway, drop dead. Let's talk about, what are the likely toxins that these individuals may have been exposed to, especially hearing what Nqobile has to say about how residents described what they saw.
Okay, well, at this stage it's basically conjecture because we don't have any good scientific evidence, but I did see some of the footage on the earlier program where they showed me the cylinder, and the cylinder points down to some form of a nitrogen oxide, and I would imagine that it could be nitrogen dioxide because if it's linked to the illegal mining, you must understand that in the mining process for gold, you use something called aqua regia, which is a mixture of concentrated nitric acid and hydrochloric acid, and in order to make the nitric acid more potent, you bubble N2O or NO2 through it to make it more potent. And that gas is normally around us in the air, especially because of all the exhaust fumes of cars, but it's not at a level where it causes toxicity in people. It will cause irritation in your throat and your alveoli and your lungs and your nose and so on, but it won't be lethal. But if something happens and there's a compressed cylinder full of the gas. Now remember, the gas in that cylinder is in a liquid form. If that gas bubbles out or comes out because the valve is compromised, then that 18 kilogram cylinder will fill possibly a couple of thousand cubic meters of space with a high density of the gas. And at that concentration, the gas is absolutely lethal to people. And we're heard now where they said the 119-year-old came out, his nose was bleeding. It makes a lot of sense to think about something like nitrogen dioxide, which is then linked to nitric acid. In other words, it will start corroding the nasal passage. It will corrode the alveoli in the lungs, the bronchi in the lungs, the trachea, the esophagus, and it definitely carries that pungent odor that people spoke about. So that's why earlier on I ruled out anything like carbon dioxide or carbon monoxide, which don't really have any odor. And obviously, because there's a link with the mining or the illegal mining, then it makes sense to start looking at a nitrogen oxide of some sorts. And that's what I would imagine happened to the people. And like I said earlier to somebody else who called me up, that the prognosis for somebody inhaling that concentration of nitrogen dioxide or anything else which is nitrogen oxide is very poor. So it is not toxic at a low level, but when it comes to that level of concentration in the atmosphere, the chance of survival is virtually nothing.
And, you know, Dr. Verdoorn, in terms of the point at which one inhales it, is there an intervention point before it leads to loss of life? So is this a situation where if there was urgent intervention, some of these lives could have been saved?
Yeah, but you must understand that you look at the people that live in that area. They're not toxicologists. They're not qualified like I'm qualified in chemistry. I would know what to do immediately. So they were all in a panic state. But if somebody knew what was happening there, the first thing that they should have done was to take the people that showed any symptoms and taken them at least, like the lady said, she ran 200 meters away from a child. And that would be a fairly safe area to get people into fresh air and to get them into a place where there's none of the toxin in the atmosphere. But that's a case of happening within minutes. It's not, you can't wait 5 minutes or 10 minutes, because by that time the person would have inhaled sufficient quantity of the gas to become toxic in the body to cause the toxidrome, which is the symptoms they showed, and then to start affecting the person's breathing system and killing the person off. So there would have had to be rapid action. And like I said, unfortunately, the people around that wouldn't know about that, so because they're not acquainted with the chemical as such.
One of the other things that is being spoken about, Dr. Verdoorn, especially by those in the mining sector, is the use of mercury and cyanide by some illegal miners in this process to try and derive gold?
Yeah, well, I've had a discussion with a police special operation unit a couple of years ago, especially about the Boksburg and the Ekurhuleni area, where there's a lot of cyanide in the area. Other words, potassium cyanide, which is used for extraction of the gold, and also mercury, because mercury can be used as a neat metal to extract the gold from the ore, because it forms what we call an amalgam with the gold. And the concern was there not only for people's health, but also for the environment, because mercury, we all know, is a heavy metal that stays there for eternity. And cyanide, we know, is toxic, but when you add a bit of acid to cyanide, it becomes hydrocyanic acid, which is volatile and extremely toxic to people. So it's not only the gas in this case which kill the people, unfortunately, but there's also the solid chemicals, like you said, the mercury and potassium cyanide and sodium cyanide in the hands of these illegal operators. And these people are reckless, completely reckless. They don't care about their own lives. Why would they care about the lives of people that live in a poor community? And we see the catastrophe tonight where 17 people are dead and 10 more in intensive care units. So I think the appeal comes from myself and from all South Africans tonight that the government must step up the pace and do something about the illegal mining, because now we've got the real result of what happens if you allow these people to continue with their illegal mining. You get the loss of life, and we don't need to lose our people in the country.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more, Dr. Verdoorn. Nqobile, let me come back to you in studio. There was a lot of tough talk today. I think you and I have had this conversation. As we speak, we still have 29 odd Lesotho nationals that are still very much trapped underground, having, very efforts being made, but so far none successfully to bring them up to the surface. It's a picture of just how deep this problem of illegal mining runs in this country.
Well, definitely, Kathy. I mean, we spoke to the police as well to ask them, because the Premier said it's time now to fight fire with fire, essentially. And we asked them if this is now the time, if they have enough. And they said they do. But at this point, they said that it's an effort that needs to bring everybody onto the table, because they're saying, as the police, they can't do it alone. So they need the mining industry to come in. They need a collaborative effort to be able to fight against this illegal mining, which of course is interesting, because you and I were even discussing what the minister was saying that the Lesotho needs to come on board as well. But there is a big question in terms of what is the country doing now, because at some point there has to be an intervention that will assist anyone that's on the ground.
All right. Dr. Verdoorn, thanks for your time and your incredibly insightful contribution to this conversation. Nqobile Madlala, she's our reporter on the story. You can expect more coverage from her in terms of some of the associated updates.